Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Finding Freedom. In this one, I'm going to talk about reasons why you should probably think of finding freedom. The other day, I had an interesting conversation with a female who, you know, keep her name out of it. However, she didn't know if she wanted to have kids or not. And, granted, she said that she was older, this, that, and the third. It was very interesting, the conversation that we had, not just because of the way that it played out, but because, well, just speaking from my own experience, and I texted this to my mother not too long ago. I told her that, I was not able to have children, and there's a reason for that, right? Certain people just shouldn't be having children, right? I had a gentleman on stage scream out that certain people are used as a weapon, so on and so forth, whatever in the world that means. And then, of course, what does it mean to not be able to have children? Many women go through what's known as menopause and things like that, right? And then, of course, they can't have children anymore, and so they could do whatever they want, etc. And I had another experience where somebody just shouted out of anger two times. The first time was, why doesn't anybody want to have children with me? And the other one was, that's not how you have children, which I thought was very interesting. And it's just funny because I wondered, how did she know? Who told her that I couldn't have children? It was one of those weird things, right? So it's very interesting because some people luck out and are able to have the ability to do so, such as my sister, right? And her husband, Devin. I think his name's Devin Michael Horner or something like that, former Air Force guy, super cool. Anyways, it was one of those things where, he was able to have children, so on and so forth. So I'm very protective sometimes of my nephew. And because of that, it's one of those things where I'm not jealous or anything like that. But I also used to say, if God ever curses me with children, and then I found out I couldn't have children, so I was like, whew, well, it looks like I'm not getting cursed anytime soon. LOL. But, when building a business and everything like that, because of everything that's going on, I mean, Tony Robbins is having this whole thing right now. When it comes to building a business, what do you need the money for? Is it for you? Is it to provide for others? Is it to provide for the children that maybe you're raising that don't belong to you, but you accept them as your own anyways? You know? So when looking at things, I had to explain stuff to this lady, and I asked her, I said, why don't you ask your boyfriend or whatever why he wants to have children? Similarly to what they do on Shark Tank, why do you need so much money? What are you going to do with the money? And so when it comes to that, it's like, do you need that much money because you have someone to support? Because if you're running a business, I mean, let's face it, there's people that have families that you have to support while you're growing your business. You can't just be self-serving, right? So, if you do have businesses or a business, right, you want to be able to not only provide for yourself, but for the people that work for you. Let's say you work at a bank or you work for the state or for the government. They ask, oh, well, what about the government workers and what about the people that work in hospitals and this, that, and the third? Well, do they have families? Do they have children? Do they work for you? Are you also trying to put money in your pocket while also putting money in theirs? Are you taking things into consideration? Excuse me one second. Fix this here. It's a little warm, so I'm wearing a tank top today. But are you taking into consideration that they have families and then there's inflation and taxes and everything else? And, you may think you're paying them $60,000 a year or 120 or whatever the case may be. But then after you subtract taxes and then after you subtract inflation, how much are you actually paying them, right? And then, of course, when it comes to putting money in your pocket, I don't know if you saw my last episode of Class, especially in the medical field, right? In the medical field, if the doctors did not get paid their salary, would they still want to do their job, right? If these hospitals weren't privately owned or publicly owned, would they still be functional in order to do the very thing that they were built and designed to do, which is heal people? Not treat symptoms, but actually heal people. Not treat symptoms so that you could keep them coming back for more, right? Because it's not a magic trick to heal somebody, right? Because you see a magic trick and you're like, oh, do another. Oh, do another. Or can you do something else? I want to see that again. So on and so forth, right? So if you think that a hospital is like a magic trick, right? You have to think of, well, are they just treating the symptoms because you want to see if something works? You want to see if you play around with something, will fire come down, so on and so forth, etc. If you play with guns or matches, somebody's eventually going to get burnt. I remember this one story. I told my sister, I said, hey, stay away from the candle, etc. I think I was lighting a candle or something like that. And curious, nosy Nancy gets closer and closer and closer, and then her hair ends up on fire. I quickly brush off her hair, so on and so forth. Parents come in, and I'm like, this one does not know how to listen. This one doesn't know what she's doing, etc. Blah, 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 blah. And she's like, what happened? And she's like, Michael lit my hair on fire. And I was like, no, I did not, you liar. You absolute liar. I said, I told you to stay away from the fire. But like a moth is drawn to a flame, some people are too curious sometimes. And so they tend to gravitate closer and closer. What would you do if the earth, right, gravitated closer and closer to the sun? What would you do? Would you find an evacuation plan because your bunkers won't help you? Would you find a way to escape? Because you would have to leave the planet in order to escape the gravitational pull of the sun that would incinerate it, right? Because science will go to dictate that the sun is like a big nuclear reactor, right? And everybody likes to build nuclear reactors, but they don't know the consequences of a nuclear reactor. You know what I'm saying? And so you have to think about these things when you're building a business. One, is it a good business? Or is it two, doing harm? Because if it's doing harm, then do unto others as you shall have them do unto you, right? So if your hospital, right, is profiting from treating your symptoms, they still can't figure out cancer, but we have ChatGPT now, which can assist with that, along with Google's Gemini and everything else, then why are things still so expensive? There's less work for people. You can expedite the process. You can see who actually knows what they're talking about, or who's copying and pasting, moving stuff over from ChatGPT or whatever. I remember I told Devin, he asked me, oh yeah, I'm thinking about going back to school, and so on and so forth. I said, oh yeah, you could put this into ChatGPT and then move it over here and it'll remove certain things. And he's like, oh, thank you, I'm gonna try that. And so I just waited because I wanted to see exactly if I could trust him, right? I remember I gave him this pen that had like a laser or something. Let me see if I have it on me right now. So it looks just like this, right? It has two buttons. The first button is a flashlight. The second one is a laser pointer. And then, of course, it acts as a stylus. And then, of course, you have a pen. And so, sometimes I get bored and I, do this with it, so on and so forth, as I'm thinking or I'm listening to something. But it's cool because it's kind of like a fidget spinner, etc. And I told him, with great power comes great responsibility, because my nephew was walking around and I shined the laser pointer, kind of like what you do with a cat, and it chased he chased the laser pointer, and same thing with the cat, it'll chase the laser pointer, so on and so forth. And he's like, oh, I need to get one of those. So I gave it to him, and I said, with great power comes great responsibility. Well, I don't know exactly how things are going, but needless to say, I don't speak to my sister anymore. I don't speak to my brother-in-law anymore. It is what it is. Not because of anything else. It's just we just chose not to speak to each other because, well, my sister likes to get too close to the fire, and Devin is still learning. And so, as we are all grown children looking for someone to guide us, how do we go through this life, even though even though we're in our 50s or whatever, and we could say things like, oh, we've been around for a long time. It's one of those things where it's like, are you ever going to get tired of the BS? Excuse me. Are you ever going to get tired of going to the doctor and not fully getting healed? I remember I was in a psychology class when I was in Rowan-Cabarrus Community College, and I had a physician come in. We had a physician come in, and the physician literally told us that people would get upset because psychologically they're expecting to get some type of medication or something when they go to the doctor. They would get upset if the doctor told them to stay home and drink orange juice or something else and get some rest and wait for your body to fight it off naturally. Instead, they want the quick fix, and that's the thing that's happening now, right? People's attention spans have gone down. How often do they actually pay attention to the world around them and what's going on? Normally, they don't pay attention to something until it affects them or everybody, right? Look at what happened during COVID. It affected everybody. And then magically, they were able to come up with some type of cure for a virus. Interesting. Cancer's been around since the time of Egypt, right? So on and so forth. They haven't figured out that one. Is that the way they, control population? Is that the way they get rid of people without ever having to actually get rid of them? Is that why they put certain things in our foods versus other countries? Because it develops problems in the body and people need stuff to do. So, well, the doctors, let's see if they'll actually do their job. We'll make sure that the food is processed or whatever, has high fructose corn syrup, etc., gives them high blood pressure, gives them this, that, and the third. And we'll see who's in it for the money that actually wants to do their job. And we'll see what companies are actually there to do good instead of doing harm, so on and so forth, because they're trying to cut corners and profiteer. There's a parable when it talks about cutting corners in the Bible. And there's other stories. You have the Sumerian texts. You have stories from Egypt with Osiris, Horus, Ra, etc. You have other stories in Islam, so on and so forth. And they talk about all these things, right? And they make fun of different, it's like the military. They make fun of different branches and everything like that. And, some people are like, oh, you shouldn't eat sausage. You shouldn't do this, etc. Well, one of the reasons why you shouldn't eat sausage is not because of the way it's made, but because of sometimes it has parasites in it. And if you eat sausage that's not done well, right, you might end up with a parasite. So if you end up with a parasite, that causes a whole bunch of issues. Yes or yes? Google it, right? And then, of course, if you do other things, so on and so forth, it's going to cause other stuff, right? So how do you fix it? Right? Well, you can fast, right? Starve things out, so on and so forth, or treat the body for parasites. That's one thing, but you have to first identify them. And then, of course, when you're in business, how do you fix the gaps and the holes in your business? Do you just throw more money at the problem so you could keep profiting and you hope people shut up? Do you give them something or fire them? Make sure that they can't make a living, etc. Leave them homeless on the street? You got to find out who are the real ones that are around you. And I get people that are very curious. Oh, what are you doing? What dip is that? What brand is that? Why are you exactly using that one? Etc. Oh, is that a pen? What kind of pen is that? This, that, and the third. Oh, is that this? And they ask all these questions. Oh, how are you going to do that? And they play dumb when they actually know, since they've been around for a long time. And some people, well, can travel, right? As they say. Some people can see the future, if you want to say that, for instance, right? It's all pattern recognition. The thing is, what are they doing to prevent the bad things from actually happening? Are they just listening and saying thank you and peacing out without reciprocity? What happens when their time comes? If you saw my last episode of class, I talked about the healthcare professionals, right? They have the catechus, not the Asclepius. The Asclepius dignifies that you have one job to do, as they say in movies. You have one job to do, right? Keep the body alive. The catechus, well, that's completely different. Now, why does the World Health Organization have the Asclepius and not the catechus? I've never seen the catechus outside of the United States. So, are we the bad people? Or are we people that use media to manipulate people? Are there better things out there in the world? Yes. But I guarantee you, if you like something, some way, shape, or form within the universe of the United States, it'll get taken away from you. If you say you love something, would you actually fight for it? If you say you want something, would you actually go out and get it? And then will the powers that be see exactly how bad you want it and how bad you want to achieve it? So they'll just keep pushing the carrot further and further away just to see you suffer, right? But then again, Buddhist teachings talks about suffering, right? Buddhist teachings talk about suffering, that life is about suffering and enduring. But is it? Who came up with that stupidity? In order to grow, you must suffer a little. But in order to live, you must respect the things around you with reciprocity. Because as the golden rule dictates, do unto others as you shall have them do unto you. Because eventually, if you go to Hinduism, the scales will get out of balance. And if the scales become out of balance, what do you think happens? Well, they have to get rebalanced, right? It's like anything else. You drive a car, right? Sometimes even down to your timing chain. You have to retighten it. You have to recalibrate it. If you're in law enforcement and you have a speedometer that catches people speeding, you have to get it recalibrated, right? Your computer needs updates, so on and so forth, so it could stay up to date with things. So what is it that you're actually searching for if you are searching for freedom and you're trying to either build a life for yourself, provide for others, or protect the very thing that's trying to protect you? You know, I see a lot of veterans out here and nobody really gives a crap about them. But if a war broke out and they're talking about the army hitting glorified numbers, etc., but yet I see these big bonuses getting thrown out there to incentivize people to come in, right? If they're doing it for the money, then there's an incentive there, right? And it's a great profession. But when you come out, what then happens, right? What then happens to the individuals, if you've seen the movie Rambo, that used to handle a lot of things way worse than what happens in the regular business world? Are the ones that are in business not understand what we do? And we do it pretty decently well? Do the ones that are in law enforcement, first responders, etc., not understand what we do? There's something called Combat Lifesaver, right? Where the amount of training that we get during that program can literally qualify you to be a nurse or a paramedic. If you're a corpsman in the Navy, you're literally a nurse, right? It's just a different way of saying it. And one of the things I noticed is that when you get out, you still have to go to nursing school to learn some stuff, right? It's not just a liability issue for the hospital. That makes no sense. The biggest liability is the stupidity that goes on that triggers wars, that causes military personnel to have to sacrifice their life to protect your dumb ass so that you could keep doing stupid stuff back here. What's good about sacrificing for the greater good if the greater good doesn't actually return the favor? The scales are out of balance. The pressure is on. Freedom of speech does not exist. People are reading pamphlets, or journals, so on and so forth. Things are becoming digitized because it'll be easier to trick the brain into thinking whatever they're seeing on the internet and not reading in a book is true. Think about it. How many lawyers reside or rely on the internet for their law school teachings, or doctors? Or do they study from books? Because it's hard to manipulate a book. It's easy to manipulate something that's digital. Let's say currency. Most people don't know this, but the majority of the Earth's currency is actually digital, which means only a handful of it is actually paper. So our debt is digital. our trillions and trillions of dollars of debt within the United States, money that we owe to other countries, is digital. But you have cash for a reason. Why is it? Because at the end of the day, people use money as a form of power and control. And if they're able to control how much power you have through money, you have to become resourceful. What does that mean? Now, this may be a little morbid, but this is going to be some military humor. There was a person talking about, World War III and the end of the world and so on and so forth, etc. And they're like, "Oh, well, are you not going to stock up on stuff, this, that, and the third?" And they're like, "No, I don't need to." He goes, "Why not?" He goes, "Well," and this was a former military guy. He goes, "I have enough guns that I'll be perfectly fine. I can hunt, so on and so forth, etc. Plus, I know everyone without guns that has the supplies that I need. So if they push comes to shove, if they don't want to work together, I'll just take their stuff from them." Now, what kind of mentality is that? Think about it. What kind of mentality is that? So at the end of everything, if things were to get crazy, are you prepared? Have you done Tim Ferriss's fear setting, making 3 columns? What's the worst things that could happen? Ways to prevent it, ways to recover, so on and so forth. Because at the end of the day, what I've been seeing is that everybody's out for themselves. Yes, there's only a handful of people that look out for each other. But when that time comes where things go belly up again, right? There was nothing greater than 9/11 and ever bringing everybody together. History's bound to repeat itself. So how long is the time between World War I, World War II, the other things that occurred, along with 9/11? Something's been preventing it, and now Trump's talking about peace in the media. Well, is it really peace or is it extortion? I don't know why we owe so much money to these people. Then we have people with money in office, Nancy Pelosi, so on and so forth, that have so many millions and all this. If they're so good with money and finances that they're able to benefit themselves, why haven't they actually helped the people that reside in their country? Why haven't they changed certain things? Why haven't they thought better? Who are they paying off to carry out their science experiment? Think about that. If you have, questions, go to ChatGPT or Google Gemini. Tell it to become a doctor. Tell it to walk you, walk you through cures for diseases. Maybe you might solve cancer and everything else and be free, right? Maybe you might actually discover the next cure to lupus or something like that. But nobody actually asked that. They're more focused on, well, if I don't have money, your focus will shift to, well, if we keep them busy on focused on not having money because they don't have money, so making money will take up their time, they won't think about all these other things because they need to maintain that power and control within the power dynamics. Are you going to run your business like that if you get into one? Are you going to treat others like that once you achieve your freedom? Think about it. I know this was a little bit more toned down, and the pitch wasn't perfect, but I want you guys to seriously think about everything that was said, because with all the chaos that's happening, they talk about Trump's plan, China's plan, 2030, 2020, whatever. What about your plan? What about the plan that you have for yourself? The plan that you have for others, your kids, your wife, your mission, your spouse, your life, whatever the case. Think about it. Because I can tell you what, every time I came close to being happy, I was put in a position where something got taken away from me and I wasn't necessarily happy anymore. It's very interesting. I remember I said that I had my life insurance policy, so on and so forth, set up so I could take care of my nephew as well if anything happened to me. And then I got fired. Amazing. Every time I try to take care of people, I get in trouble. Think about that. Why are they stopping me from helping people like you? Anyways, this has been another episode of Finding Freedom. I will see you guys in the next one. Take care. Bye bye. Bye bye.